Welcome back, grade 12 with unit 2, North Star, Lies and Truth. Today we're going to look at reading 2 on the river. You can flip your page to page 40. Awesome, there we are, reading 2 on the river. Look at the bold-faced words and phrases in the reading and think about the questions. So the first question is, which words and phrases do you know the meaning of? Can you use any of the words or phrases in a sentence? Now, we're going to look at the words first. Oh, that's such a cute picture, yeah? This is an old story from the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Love, 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 love it. Okay, we've got feverish, conscience. Okay, to the next page, we have get around. Reach up, down, we get promptly. And we go to the next page, pretending. Okay, going back, looking at these words all together in the text, if you have a problem understanding what they mean, you can go online, use a search engine to figure out what it means. And you could also write the Bahasa Indonesian definition on it, on top of it. Now, number 1, which words and phrases do you know the meaning of? Write that down. And 2, can you use any of the words or phrases in a sentence? I would like you to pick one word or phrase, one only, and make a sentence. In the next meeting, you can tell me what your sentence is. Okay? Pause your video to do that first. Go ahead. Awesome. That brings us to our reading strategies. First one. What's that? Previewing. Good. Yeah. Predicting the type of text and the purpose. And how do we do that? We look at the title, we look at the headings, we look at the picture, the visual to see what it is. Now, what type of text is this? Can you tell me? Narrative. Very good. It's a story. Yeah, this is a very famous story, people. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, written by Mark Twain. Very famous. It's an old schooler. It's a classic. Beautiful story. Okay, so as we know that this is a narrative, this is a story, we know that the purpose is to entertain. Great. Now we've got that settled. How about the skimming, though? Because the skimming for an informational text is different than skimming a story. Right, so skimming a story, what we mostly do is just read the setting, the beginning of the story, and sometimes we go to the end of the story to read that, to figure out what it is about. Let's try do that together, okay? The story you're about to read takes place in the United States before the Civil War, 1861 until 1865, in the South. 4 million black people were slaves. Many wanted to go to the North to live freely, but any white person who helped them was committing a crime. Mark Twain, the famous American writer, wrote this story 20 years after the end of slavery. Although he deals with his story in a humorous way, he tries to make a more general point about social customs and morality, about lies and deeper truth. Now, whatever is written underneath, so this is like an introduction of the story, and then here you have like the setting, which we also want to read. Definitely something like this. Huck and Jim are on a raft floating down the Mississippi River. Both of them are runaways. Huck, age 14, has run away from his drunk and abusive father, and Jim, a slave, has run away from his owner to reach a town in the north where he can be free. Now let's go to the end of the story. Then I thought a minute and said to myself, now hold on, suppose you had done what was right and given Jim up. Would you feel better than you do now? No. I said, I feel bad. I'd feel just about as bad as I do right now. Well then, I said to myself, what is the use in trying to learn to do the right thing? I couldn't answer my own question, so I decided not to worry about it anymore. From then on, I just do whatever seemed easiest at the time. Okay, from there we already get an idea, especially the beginning, because it gives like an introduction of the story. The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, that's a thick book, okay? So this is just an excerpt. This is just a very short part taken from a very long story. That mostly when they use excerpts, they always give you an introduction of the story to know where we are at in the story, because it's only a particular part of it. Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so having done that, let's listen and read along.
On the River, from The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, by Mark Twain. The story you are about to read takes place in the United States before the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. In the South, 4 million black people were slaves. Many wanted to get to the North to live freely, but any white person who helped them was committing a crime. Mark Twain, the famous American writer, wrote this story 20 years after the end of slavery. Although he deals with his story in a humorous way, he tries to make a more general point about social customs and morality, about lies and deeper truth. Huck and Jim are on a raft floating down the Mississippi River. Both of them are runaways. Huck, age 14, has run away from his drunk and abusive father, and Jim, a slave, has run away from his owner to reach a town in the north where he can be free. There wasn't anything to do now but to look out for the town and not pass it without seeing it. Jim said he'd be very sure to see it because he'd be a free man the minute he saw it. Jim said it made him feel all trembly and feverish to be so close to freedom. Well, I can tell you, it made me all over trembly and feverish too, because I'd just realized that he was almost a free man, and who was to blame for it? Why, me. I couldn't get that out of my conscience. I tried to tell myself that I wasn't to blame because I didn't take Jim from his rightful owner. But it wasn't any use. Conscience comes and says every time, but you knew he was running for his freedom, and you could have told somebody. That was true. I couldn't get around that. What had poor Miss Watson done to me that I could see her slave go off right under my eyes and never say one single word? I felt so mean and miserable, I wished I were dead. Jim talked out loud all the time while I was talking to myself. He was saying how, as soon as he got to a free state, he would save up money and never spend a single cent, and when he got enough, he would buy his wife, who was owned on a farm close to where Miss Watson lived. And then they would both work to buy the 2 children, and if their master wouldn't sell them, he'd get an abolitionist to go and steal them. It almost froze me to hear such talk. He wouldn't ever have dared to talk such talk in his life before. Just see what a difference it made in him the minute he judged he was about free. Old Jim won't ever forget you, Huck. You're the best friend Jim's ever had, and you're the only friend he has now. I was paddling off, all in a sweat to tell on him, but when he said this, it seemed to take all the tuck out of me. That's you, the only white gentleman who ever kept his promise to old Jim. Well, I just felt sick. Right then, along comes a small skiff with 2 men in it, with guns, and they stopped and I stopped. One of them says, "Any men on that raft?" "Only one, sir." "Well, 5 slaves ran off tonight. Is your man white or black?" I didn't answer promptly. I tried to, but the words wouldn't come. I tried, for a second or two, to brace up and out with it, but I wasn't man enough. I hadn't the spunk of a rabbit. I saw I was weakening, so I just gave up trying and said, "He's white. I guess we'll go and see for ourselves." I wish you would, I said, because it's Pop that's there, and maybe you'd help me tow the raft to shore where the light is. He's sick, and so is Mom and Mary Ann. Say, boy, what's the matter with your father? It's well, it isn't anything much. Your pop's got smallpox, and you know it. Why didn't you just say so? Do you want to spread it to everyone? Well, says I, pretending to cry, I've told everybody before, and then they just went away and left us. Here, I'll put a $20 gold piece on this board, and you get it when it floats by. I feel mighty mean to leave you, but it won't do to fool with smallpox, don't you see? They went off, and I got back on board the raft, feeling awful, because I knew for certain that what I'd just done was wrong. I saw that it was no use for me to try and do the right thing. Then I thought a minute and said to myself, now, hold on. Suppose you had done what was right and given Jim up. Would you feel better than you do now? No, I said. I'd feel bad. I'd feel just about as bad as I do right now. Well then, I said to myself, what's the use in trying to learn to do the right thing? I couldn't answer my own question. So I decided not to worry about it anymore. From then on, I'd just do whatever seemed easiest at the time.
Beautiful story. Yes. Okay, that brings us to comprehension, guys. What did we get from the story? Now, in order to answer this, you're going to complete each sentence with a word or phrase from the box. We've got buy, conscience, freedom, friend in the north, light, saved, and smallpox. To know which one it is, you would have to go back to the text. So you might want to annotate, circle, underline any of the words, keywords in the sentence, and scan through your text, which means that you look over your text really fast in order to find the keyword so you know which one is correct. You can pause your video to do so. Go ahead. Great. That brings us to our reading scale. Now, really quick for our reading strategies, the first one was previewing right, predicting the type of text and the purpose. And then we had skimming, where we get the main idea by reading the introduction, the topic sentences, and the concluding paragraph. And then scanning is going over the text real quick to find a keyword or key phrase in order to find a detail or a fact that we need to answer a question. Now, for the reading skill, we are looking at recognizing irony. Now, that is something. Irony is a device an author uses to say the opposite of what he or she really means. How ironic. That's what you often hear, right? It is usually done for humorous effect. It's actually humor, like kind of dry humor. But it often has a serious purpose as well. Now, often the readers understand what is really going on in the story, but the characters in the story do not know what's going on. That could be the case. A writer always knows, but they could write it in such a way that the characters don't know. So with irony, you're basically saying something while meaning the opposite. Underline what Huck thinks to himself and does not say. I want you to pause your video and do this first. I want you to underline what Huck thinks to himself, what he's thinking, but what he's not really saying. You can pause your video first. Great, we continue. Look at the example and read the explanation. Jim says, "That's you, the only white gentleman who ever kept his promise," to old Jim. Huck thinks to himself, "Well, I just felt sick." Now, in this case, the reader knows that Huck is thinking or turning Jim over to the authorities, but Jim doesn't know it. He's thanking Huck for being a real friend. See? because Huck thinks to himself, well, I just felt sick. He says that to himself, but he didn't say that out loud. So in this case, Jim wouldn't know what Huck was thinking. So what you get is that Jim doesn't know it. And he's thanking Huck for being a real friend, whereas actually Huck was not really a great friend at that time. So irony is definitely something when you say something but you mean the opposite. It's meant for humor, often very dry humor, and can have a serious purpose. Okay, now you're going to read each excerpt and you're going to answer the questions by choosing 1, 2, 3, or 4 from the box. You have your explanations of irony, right? For example, how to do the right thing. In his situation, it's very unclear to Huck, blah, blah, blah. It is true by running away. Jim talks about Huck being his best friend, and Huck is shocked that Jim would speak so forcefully. These are 4 points from the text. I want you to read each excerpt and then answer the question by choosing 1, 2, 3, or 4 from this box here. You can choose which one completes it. What is the irony? Okay, pause your video. Please answer number 1 until 4. Awesome. That brings us to the end of reading 2 already. Connecting the readings, we're going to look at the text from reading 1 and the text of reading 2. Now, the first thing we do is step 1, and step 1 is organizing the information. So we're going to get information from both texts, and then we're going to combine that information to create something new, and that is synthesizing. Now, synthesizing is when we're using multiple sources, combining that information, then paraphrasing it because we cannot copy paste, and creating something new. That could be a paragraph, a summary, an essay. In speaking, it could be a speech, it could be a presentation, anything. Now, in this case, you're going to complete a chart. As you can see here, this can be called a chart, a table. This is called a graphic organizer. We have tables, we have flowchart, Venn diagrams, mind map, pyramids, columns, and so on. Decide yes or no if the main idea of the reading 1 are expressed in reading 2 or 2. Yes or no if the main ideas of reading 1 are expressed in reading 2. And then I want you to explain how these main ideas are expressed in the second reading. Now we can look at the first one. Only a very small number of people can sniff out lies. You can sniff it. That is in paragraph 3. Now, is that mentioned also in reading 2, yes or no? Yes, it is. The men on the boat don't recognize Huck's lies. So basically, looking for the lie is more informative in reading 1, but then in reading 2, it's a story, right? So is there something that is connected in this case? Yes, and give the idea of it. And like the last one, a foolproof lie detection device would turn our quotidian lives upside down. Paragraph 10. Is it connected? Is it mentioned in reading 2? Yes. There would be no moral decisions. Huck would have had no choice. He would have had to turn over the slave. That is the lines 51 to 56. So there is a connection. Now, what about number 2? There are malicious lies. Paragraph 4. 3. Intelligence began in social manipulation and deceit. Paragraph 6. And 4. Lying is something, a nobler, kinder option than telling the truth. Paragraph 8. Number 2 is that mentioned in reading 2, yes or no, and the same goes for number 3 and 4. You answer with yes or no and give a detail or a reason. Now, having connected and collected all that information from reading 1 and 2 brings us to step 2 of synthesizing, where we're going to use that information to create something new. In this case, you're going to complete a paragraph. Yeah. Show how the main ideas of reading 1 are supported in reading 2. You're going to complete a summary with the words and phrases in the box, looking at intelligence, malicious, moral, possibility of lying, and save his friend. This is basically creating and completing a paragraph. You can pause your video to do step 1 and step 2. Go ahead. Okay, that brings us back to the end of reading 2. We went over the vocabulary words, the boldface words in the context of the text, figuring out what it means. We looked at the story Huckleberry Finn, the adventures of Huckleberry Finn on the river, which is by predicting the reading strategy of predicting, we found out that that is a narrative. So the purpose is to entertain, which means that previewing is to predict text type and purpose by looking at the title and the visuals and the headings, if there are any. And then the second reading strategy we talked about was skimming, where we want to find the main idea of the text, and we do that mostly in an informational text by reading the introductory paragraph, topic sentences, and concluding paragraph. In this case, as we were looking at a story, the skimming is a little bit different, so we definitely read the beginning of the story, so we focus on any information that is added. If it is an excerpt, meaning if it's not a complete text, so it's just a small part taken from a complete story, means that there's always like a start of the story, an introduction where they tell us where the story takes place. Where are we within the story? So that is super important to read. And the setting, yeah? And the setting of the story, and you might want to read the ending of your story to get an idea, or a main idea of what the text is about, the story is about. Then we went into comprehension, and we learned that annotating is super important, right? And that by having underlined and circled the keywords and phrases, we use those to scan the text to find specific details or facts in order to answer questions or complete a paragraph or whatever we need to do. The reading skill we looked at is recognizing irony, and irony means that we're saying something, but we're basically meaning something else. We're meaning the opposite, and it's often used to create a humorous effect, and also can be used as a serious purpose. Yes. Or to bring deeper underlying meaning, and that is often used in stories. Irony is therefore also one of the literate devices used in literature. And then it brought us to connecting the readings. We came up with facts and points from reading 1 and reading 2, and then we synthesized all that information into completing 1 paragraph. Awesome! You did great today. We will see each other again in the next video. Thank you very much for your hard work. Stay excited. God bless you. Bye-bye.